Ooh, an interesting article on Substack. We're archiving this. The Activision Blizzard scandal exposes the hollowness of the anti-Gamergate movement. Let's read this shit real quick. There's some garbage. Get the shit up. Make sure it's not on the porn screen. Alright, let's read some garbage. Who's ready, ladies and gentlemen? Are you excited? You're excited to be exposed to some cringe? It'll be fucking horrible. Okay. Make the setup just like it's a normal fucking thing. Okay. Is that the right fucking page? Is it? Is it? Is it? Come on, stream. Yes, it is. Okay. The Activision Blizzard scandal. Start recording. Oop. And go. Okay. The Activision Blizzard scandal exposes the hollowness of the anti-Gamergate movement. In 2014, a thing happened called the Goo Brigade. It was a weird time in which Adam Goldwyn never coined the term. Gamers were upset about ethics in video game journalism, amongst other things. Won't go into all the details, but I'll brief what happened. We're not going to fucking read that, because this is cope, and that's a goddamn lie. Also, nice. After this, op-eds start dropping, because hey, if you can't shut down the discussion, you might as well douse it in gasoline and light a match. Things kicked off with A. Alexander's infamous Gamers Are Dead piece at Game Sutra. The piece was aped by a couple dozen other writers from other outlets, slamming gamers with evil neckbeards, because incel wasn't a term yet. Yes, it was. It wasn't corrupted yet, is the problem. Who hate women were out trying to drive women out of the video game industry with a rampant misogyny. The ethics and journalism was a ruse for a nefarious facade. It's about harassment and nothing else. Narrative that stuck so convincingly. That's all people know about Gamergate today, because no one stopped to ask why all of a sudden so many people were doing all this harassment, taken at face value, out of the blue and without much provocation at all, that an army of misogynists had coordinated a sudden fierce onslaught against women simply because they didn't want them women in video games. This was, to put mildly, a gross overreaction that broke the internet's first rule of thumb: don't feed the trolls. No, it broke the 0th rule, which is stop pissing people off and don't push people's buttons for cash. Not only did it smear all gamers who were actually concerned about ethics issues in the game industry, many who were the same ones upset by Mass Effect 3 ending. It had less to do with Mass Effect 3 ending and had more to do with the fact that they were just told that journalists withhold information to feather their careers and also to play butt buddy to people who are general fucking scum. Flame wars ensued. We saw a lot of online harassment that took place, but no one wanted to talk about the degree to which it was provoked and invited by people denouncing it. Sheer on a clickbait was staggering. I can't even recall how many concerned articles I read that were just clear attempts at driving traffic via conflict. No one looked at the dust after it settled. I felt that I needed a month-long shower. Very nearly broke my brain, but then along came the Trumpu. To me, this exposed many things about many people, including the ideologically driven nature of the gaming press and the willingness as gamers as a crowd to follow whoever would speak up for them, even if that meant following Mile Yiannopoulos. And so we come to Acti-Blizzard's lawsuit, which alleges both harassment and discrimination at the World of Warcraft and Call of Duty Maker. No, you kind of can't lump Activision Blizzard together. It's either Activision Blizzard or it's specifically Blizzard. Because the problem with this is that it was Activision who did a bunch of shit, but also Blizzard did a bunch of shit as well. You cannot lump them together as a whole, because they're not. They are a broken, consolidated conglomerate. that is acting as a single unity that actually represents two different mindsets of an office. One is what happens when something gets corrupted over time and eroded. The other one is what happens when you have a conglomerate that does not give a fuck and doesn't give a shit, that decides we're going to push our corporate policies and practice into the medium as a whole space, and then we're going to corrupt everyone else around us that we touch. That's the problem there. It's not one or the other. It's both at the same time for their own reasons. If you look at them as a single entity, you have failed to understand how this came to pass. Because Blizzard was a powerhouse and a titan that was acquired by the other one. If you lump them in as a single one, you are failing to realize how this could have been addressed before Blizzard was corrupted. But moving on. The real enemy. What the anti-Gamergate movement missed, obviously, was the real problem of facing women in the video game industry, the industry itself, the institutional hurdles facing women in video games and video game companies, the bad people who worked at those publishers. Yes, that is correct. I noted at the time somewhere, I can't find it, it's not surely gamers' fault that the only women you see at E3 or GDC seem to always be in PR. That's not because Gamergate was driving women out of the industry, there weren't even that many women in the industry to begin with, it's because of the old boys club. The fucking Cosby Suite was a thing at BlizzCon in 2013, a year before Gamergate was even a twinkle in Adam Baldwin's eye, but many years after the first Cosby sexual allegation assaults were made. We were supposed to think that it's a ragtag group of anonymous gamers on 4chan that present the biggest threat to women in video games. The kind of corporate misogyny and abuse that was going on long before Gamergate and kept going on unabated during the intervening years with the rise of the Me Too movement. The real threat facing women in video games isn't some asshole on Twitter, it's the asshole behind the desk writing checks and making hiring decisions, calling shots and turning a blind eye. And also abusing them while also going to their office manager and saying, bro, don't even worry about it. I forgot that part too. What I've been saying for about a decade. What has Jim Sterling been saying? We've been pointing out over and over again that this industry stinks. No, not you. We already knew that. Actual journalists already did that. We've been mentioning that. If it wasn't for places like Substack, you wouldn't have said this publicly. Y'all are more than responsible for this. Because as long as you've been saying, oh, well, I said it the longest of time. Yes, but then you looked over at people like Jim Sterling, who are doing the very thing you just blamed Miley Yiannopoulos for. How the fuck are you going to say this about Miley Yiannopoulos, and you don't say the same thing about Jim Sterling, or any other person who talks about gaming discourse as a career path, while absolutely playing the same fucking trick? Clownish. 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 I lost my place. We've been pointing out over and over again, it stinks. Ethics in game journalism is concerned not because journalists are horrible people. No, journalists are horrible people too. It's not just that. It is, they're horrible people and also, not but, horrible people and also because these publishers are all about money and don't care a single iota about the working conditions of the workforce that they have that is getting faced by these problems until it becomes a scandal or until the sex pestry and the abuse that men and women, forgot the men in there, but it's men and women, face and get abused by from their superiors until it becomes a scandal, or the shitty business practices that has been practiced not just by the companies, but also by the game's journalists. The biggest issue that any person should have had and did have with the Goobergay wasn't just Chelsea Van Valkenburg abusing Aaron Gianni and then squelching him with a legal order so she could slander him with absolutely no repercussion. It wasn't just that. It was the scamming and the gambling done by the journalist websites, and also the lack of fucking ethics. It was three things as a whole. A drama of a woman using her pussy as power, the drama of websites selling gambling to children, and the unethicality of writing stories and news pieces about personal friends, lovers, husbands, exes, and everything else under the sun based on absolutely nothing else but rumor, if not only rumor, and then propagating it in a news cycle until it becomes news. That's what caused that. There's nothing else on top of that. To believe that it's just one is to fail to see the problem. But why waste President's time writing about how these awful incel gamers are when the real villains, the mustache-wearing motherfuckers, are the ones in the high towers calling the shots but not holding their managers accountable, not paying their employees well enough, burdening even the developer crunch, turning a blind eye to rampant sexual harassment, laying off hundreds or thousands of employees while laughing all the way to the bank with their bonuses and stock options and massive profits. You could have just said Bobby Kotick. You really just could have said Bobby Kotick. Sure, there are plenty of bad, racist, sexist, annoying gamers also. Not really. No. most of them get bullied into fucking silence because they're not going to say it to people who actually don't give a shit. I don't give a shit about people saying nasty words on the internet while they're playing a competitive match, because they're usually going to get the toxicity out of their system and then they're completely fine. What I care about, and what anyone should care about, isn't the supposed bad, racist, sexist, annoying gamers who are not going to be cared for or looked at all. It's going to be the people who are going to use someone like yourself, or any other journalist, or any other sports person, or any other fucking idea of a personality, and they're going to use them as a weapon to try to beat people over the head with whatever dumb shit they want to talk about, while at the same time putting themselves in the news. That's who I concern myself with. I concern myself with the girl from Canada's who will lie, and then when they get called out on getting about lying, instead of just not doing it, instead of being the person who deletes the tweet or says, you know what, I'm sorry for that, I'm gonna do better for next time, I'm gonna stop clout chasing for fucking for efficacy on the internet. Instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be honest. No, what they do instead is they fucking lock their tweets and they make it so that nobody can reply. That's what they do. That's what happens here. Video game community can absolutely suck at times for anyone who plays competitive games. I know this. The problem is not competitive games, because the people who fucked up competitive games are people who don't want to actually see challenge. That's what that is. Well, I think the anti-Gamergate movement was so hollow, so pointless, so much about virtue signaling and having some fun fanning the culture flame war rather than making the video game industry better. The exact sort of movement that would inspire quite possibly the worst episode of Law of Order SVU to ever be made. It's not hard. It's not hard either to attack the gamers or any amorphous group, the basket of deplorables, the commies, or the whatever you want to attack. Frankly, within the Gamergate movement, it fell prey to the same bullshit, often taking sides with game publishers against journalists, even though that was going to, as though it was going to solve the problems with the game industry. See, for instance, the idea that game reviews should be 100% objective, and that any opening therein is a bad thing, or the many ways that gamers have over the years defended their favorite corporate behemoths against criticism. The thing about this is that this is correct, but it's also wrong. If a person is willing to do something like take advantage of the stupidity that comes with someone doing something like this, where they will reference something that happened on Law & Order SVU, and the only thing that people have to compare that thing to is some stupid topical joke, like the way that people have what gaming is framed to them comes from the head of something like SNL, and SNL writers don't know a goddamn thing about being a gamer. They don't know anything about video games. All they know is that they've rubbed elbows with Ninja once, and so that becomes the basis of what jokes are. Some of it is tongue-in-cheek, and because they make a joke of it, they de-rank and also play down the actual seriousness of how dumb that gets. That's what that happens there. Because when you actually have a serious fucking problem, like what I covered on the podcast like last night, when you have people who come out of the woodworks, like clout chasers that come after people like me and try to use my words so they can get a little bit more clicks and more subs on their fucking streams. When I'm covering an issue like a paid shill for Twitch basically being used as an excuse to write an article, the way that they did Ashley Roboto, we get to a point where it's the then, and then, and the then, and the then, and the then. By the time we get 3 steps down, we're looking at something like what is happening at Acti-Blizzard, because it's gotten nothing but worse. There's literally nothing but worse. It's been shit the entire fucking time. And that's on them. We started at SinglePlayerCarl has a take about video games, and about why people don't appreciate why games are good, and how that affects their ability to do shit. And we got to constant rape accusations, and then verified proof of what you've always known, being admitted now that it becomes topical to get a few clicks. Because now we'd like to take this time to have people donate money to our charity. Could have done before, but we didn't want to. It wasn't politically and financially viable for us. That's what caused that. There is no other interpretation. Unfortunately, we have too much evidence. Focus. Moving on. Frankly, within Gamergate, public praise is bullshit. Meanwhile, the real assholes kept getting away with it. Either they are businessmen or politicians, bankers, or game publishers. True. Revelations of abuse at Ubisoft Singapore and throughout the company and at Activision Blizzard should be viewed as the tip of the iceberg. It's not just the tip of the iceberg. That's actually the middle of the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg would be gaming shills. It goes gaming shills, long baked in old guards on YouTube, and then gaming journalists like Jason Schreier, and then companies like Acti-Blizzard standing behind people like Jeff Kaplan until he left after Overwatch was no longer viable for him to make money off of, and then the politicians. If you identify them as the tip, you have failed to understand the problem. Because it's not the journalists who are running the subterfuge for them all the goddamn time. It's the always 25/8 online Twitter woke scolds. It's the crazy people that never log the fuck off. They're the ones that are at the tip of the iceberg. The kind of people that send me hate mail and death threats in my fucking emails. The rot runs deep. If you think it's just limited to a couple of publishers, think again. I'm sure there's some studios that this kind of thing isn't tolerated, but even woke developers like Naughty Dog have been exposed altogether, too willing to employ crunch to get a game like The Last of Us Part 2 out. As readers know, I'm all for due process, accountability, freedoms of accession, and the importance of evidence when determining guilt, but the video game industry is broken utterly and completely. Activision stock has been plummeting as the scandal intensifies. Good. Make it go lower. It's unclear what will happen next. No, I know exactly what's going to happen. Will they survive the lawsuit? Yes. They're going to get saved by Tencent, and they're going to get bought out by them, and it's going to give them the ability to recoup their losses and make them develop something else that's going to make that better, rather than worse. They're going to buy their stock values, they're going to buy them at 100% acquisition, and they're going to make them remove any fucking mention of anything ever again. And they're never going to have any propaganda anymore, ever again. The only version of China that you're going to see in their video games is going to be this version that Tencent wants them to put there. They're going to make a mobile game for every single game that they have, as well as updating the mobile versions of the game they already have out. And they will become an even worse profiteering, gambling corporation machine, because every single one of those games will have loot boxes. Because if you think what happens with WoW retail is bad, don't even look into fucking Hearthstone. Don't even look into the card packs. Don't even look into the fact that to get card packs properly, you have to fucking grind like a maniac every single day. Never mind the fact that that's how all those card games work, or any side game works, but it's that invasive that it's become the bare minimum of every single mobile game port that is invented and designed. And it was already happening before any of this came through. Things can always get worse. Here's my point. Gamergate was a deeply flawed movement, but it sprung out of a sense that game journalists didn't represent consumer interests, that instead they were industry shills, bought and paid for by the big publishers again and again. The game journalists kept taking the side of the industry, as we saw during Mass Effect 3 scandal. Now fast forward 7 years, and we see that the true rot of the industry was clearly at the dark side of these massive corporations, that people were rightfully concerned that journalists were too cozy with these entities, flown off to lavish preview events, wine and dine at conferences, showered with swag and so forth. And mistrust in the media is at a whole all-time highs for a reason. Yes. I don't even have to attach this to the goober gay. Gaming publishers are way too attached at the hip and have put a noose and a vise on the balls of any person who wants to break into game journalism. Doesn't matter how innocent you are. All that mattered was that you started out doing a thing, and then as time went on, you were allowed or not allowed to exist while doing that thing. And that ultimately caused a rift. And that rift was caused by this. And it is unfortunate that it was caused by this, but it was caused by that. That is what caused that. You put them in a vise, and you tell them, you do what we want and you say what we want, or you're never gonna fucking be a person in this industry. And that scared a lot of people. And so, they sucked the cock, and then after they were already sucking the cock, it's like, we already got you on this shit, you might as well get even dirtier. Where are you gonna go? Who's gonna take you? I, for one, have been given pause by these latest revelations of abuse. You should have already been given pause. It is our job to cover these companies and their games, and how we cover it and to what end is an important question. They made a game. Here's what's in the game. This is my opinion of how the game plays. That's it. That's all you have to do. You don't have to give an you don't need to give an efficacy of takes about their fucking corporate policies. You can do that in a different article. And you can even state that at the door. That's literally what you said. You can have a subline that says, I do not endorse this company and its business and all of its property. And at the same time you say that, you can also say, I don't support them, but here is what is inside the game. I'm going to do the bare minimum of my job, and that's it. That's what it goes to. That's where it starts. It's where it ends. Corporate incentives is an important question. Said in the past, journalists ought to maintain an adversarial relationship with subjects like game publishers and politicians, but it's always tricky since you need to work together to some degree to get interviews, early review codes, and so forth. But maybe access isn't worth the cost. None of those terms. It's never been worth it. Access journalism is the worst kind of journalism. It always has been. Because as long as they get to set the terms, you're never going to be allowed to have a foot up. Because when you don't do what they want, they're just going to go to the journalists that will. This is actually a very common problem, especially when it comes to the journalism that's been documenting anything that happened with Riot. There is a particular name of a particular fucking individual who does Riot interviews. And he's been a shill for a very long time. And it was actually covered on a podcast on the Four Horsemen. If it wasn't the Four Horsemen, it was something to do with Insight Esports with Richard Lewis and the guys from the Four Horsemen. They were specifically shitting on this dude because all he existed to do was be a cockweasel for the company. And he was going on and on bragging about, oh my god, I'm getting all these exclusive interviews. And it's like, I wonder fucking why. I wonder fucking why you're getting these interviews. And that's the reason why. It's access journalism. But it's tiers of access journalism, right? We're talking about 3 different tiers, at least. The first tier of access journalism is you give me a good coverage of the story, and we get you an early event pass to this event. You get to go be on the floor show. You get to be the presenter for a new game. You maybe even get to be the person who gets to play it on stream first. You know, you're the first people you're the first person we contact when we want to do ads on shit. Then there's the tier 2 of access journalism. Hey you, male or female, we want you to represent our game because you have the kind of energy that we want. And then it becomes tier 3. And tier 3, well, tier 3. Subscribe to the concept, eat the bullshit that the company spews out, constantly be the first person to talk about how it's super important to personality and identity and diversity and inclusion to do all this shit, while you're also in the DMs and the mentions simping up to e-girls. Looking at you, Rod! Especially Rod Slasher Breslau. It's actually ironic. Those are the tiers of consumer access journalism, actually. Tier 3 is Slasher. Tier 2 is, well, people like Leigh Alexander. And I guess you could say anywhere between tier 1 to tier 2, sliding scale between tier 3, is people like early career Nathan Grayson. And maybe the face of tier 3 when you're really down bad is current degree year Nathan Grayson. Hell, I was blacklisted by Sony a year ago and it hasn't stopped me from covering the PS5 in the exact same manner as before. I just don't get review copies from Sony. Oh well, in my podcast with Colin Moriarty, he says he no longer accepts any review codes and copies from publishers at all. Jim Sterling has also been largely blacklisted or lost in the industry for his harsh and sometimes bizarre criticism, so maybe it's time the whole gaming press turned its back on access to these publishers entirely. Not stop covering them, which feels wrong-headed for many reasons. Just stop worrying about what they'll do if you say something mean about their games or their business models, and don't go to their parties and ridiculous preview events. This applies as much, if not more, to YouTubers who profit directly from big corporations in ways that would be deemed deeply unethical for traditional media. Whatever the case, something needs to change. I'm just not sure anything meaningful really will. What do you think? What I think is that if you decide to put your hands in directly with people like Jim Sterling, you're going to find yourself incapable of actually burning down the problem. Because this is a dual-headed problem. These things are conjoined at the fucking hip even. It's very, very simple to understand too. It goes a little something like this. As long as you're willing to say one thing about Milo, but you refuse to acknowledge the problem with people like Jim Sterling, you're gonna constantly fall afoul of this. And it will never stop falling afoul. Because you'll say the exact same logic behind what they're doing to get shit. You'll do the exact same logic behind people like Aaron Hansen. You do the exact same bullshit behind any person that's a clout chaser, that's looking for ass pats, for saying the correct take at the correct time so people can say, oh, look, this is the correct take. This is what everybody should see. And then at the same time you do that, when people like myself are just existing, vibing, doing even shit like this right now, nothing exists. Because unfortunately, as long as those people are looked at in the same opinion, the way that we used to look at Total Biscuit, God rest the man's soul, when you elevate people like Jim to the level of Biscuit, and they're not able to be anything close to Total Biscuit, but everybody runs to them as the person they should go to hear about the opinion of, Who the fuck is crashing my stream? Every single time I look at my fucking panel, I see myself fucking crashing on the stream. As long as you elevate people to the level of Total Biscuit, and this is a really serious problem, too, when you really think about it. If you elevate people to the level of Total Biscuit, and you say, I don't know why we don't have this problem solved anymore, and there's no new blood that's being talked about, that's being discussed, that's being looked at, whose opinions are being heard and listened to, and at least people are able to say, okay, I don't like the way they said it, but he said it, and that's his opinion, and I just leave it there, and let's discuss the actual issue that's presented, not, look at this man, look at him, gaze upon him, look at this man, look at him, look at him. If we get away from that ad hominem, and we address the fact that someone's right, and we don't ignore it, based on that person's actual perspective, if they're actually talking real shit, they're giving you examples, you don't get to say, we don't listen to that person, we don't like them here. That's the problem. I should be able to give the benefit of the doubt to Jem, but I can't. The reason I can't is because Jem is the most guilty party who does this on a regular fucking basis. All he ever does is this. And it's disgusting. People don't get shit talked about because of this level of gatekeeping. I don't blame Colin for this, and I certainly don't blame his co-host who wrote this article for this. Because this is his opinion. On Substack, none the fucking less. It's not Eric Kane's fault. But I do have fucking criticism of it. Because it is the very idea that you're naming here. Naming one of the people who are guilty for making everything political. And never listening when they're wrong. Especially the people who call them out. Who are basically literally who's. Like when I started in 2017. When I was a literally fucking who. People like myself. Having the correct analysis. Looking at all of the precedent that brings us to here. And getting ignored. Because somebody on the internet decided to lie about it. Is the reason why we're here. Once you address that, once you address the, why is it that all of these people just randomly started talking dog shit about this person? Because you recognize it. You understand it's a problem. But it's not clicking. That's the problem. It's not clicking to you. Until you address the problem of esports journalists deciding they don't want to do the basic ethical standard and criticize the company, we're never going to get past this problem. We're just going to get stuck behind this wall where there's no new talent. The same people who are the same shills just keep bouncing from publication to publication, if not literally starting their own and starting the harassment train right back the fuck up again because there's no oversight and it's corporate and company policy to use wokeisms as a way to just scrap from real problems. See the walkout, for example. What was achieved by them walking out of the studio? What happened? What actually happened? Not just whose name got changed in the video game. What physical punishments, what actual heads on pikes were affixed because of the behaviors of the guilty parties? Former associates, former people in the company had the pieces of their memorabilia taken. That doesn't fucking matter. They can always have a copy of that in their fucking office and say, yeah man, I used to be part of this game. But it doesn't matter. What actual fucking penalties have been paid for the actions of Acti-Blizzard? How many for Take-Two? How many for Naughty Dog? How many for Sony as a whole? How many for the PlayStation brand as a whole? How many for the journalists that are responsible for bringing us here? How many for the people who are responsible for conflating and constantly accusing the criticism of their detractors and of their most common and most recognized critics as anything other than a bench-a-keg? As anything other than that one random troll on the internet that I don't like. Other than that one toxic misogynist who called me out on a stream once and I couldn't lie about it because he put what I did on screen. How many people have actually paid a crime for that? How many people are ever going to be addressed for that? How many times are we ever going to call out those shills that are doing it? And how many times are you going to call out people like Melanie Yiannopoulos as a grifter, but not do the same thing to fucking Jim Sterling? Fix that, we'll get somewhere. Oh fucking well. No. It's a good take. But I just wish we could be able to get that point across. You know? One of these days we're gonna do it. It's gonna happen. Where's my cursor? Where's my cursor? Computer, please. Computer, please. Give me back my cursor. I promise I'll be good. My god, I can't screen. I can't even click. Come on. There we go. Now it's back.